guys, welcome back to Pastor John's Kitchen. Today we're going to be talking about preparing lamb for Passover. So hopefully you've already watched my how to prepare unleavened bread video. If not, you can go back and check that out on our channel as well as we prepare for Passover, or maybe you want to use those as communion wafers. So today what we have here is some leg of lamb. It came from the store already wrapped in this little netting stuff, and that's to help it cook more evenly. So what we're going to do first is we're going to kind of peel this netting back a little bit to let us get in there and season it. So we're going to talk about seasoning the lamb right now, and then what I like to do is let it season overnight. If you don't have overnight, that's okay. Just let it sit for as long as you have. So before we season it, what we're going to do is we're going to make some cuts along this fat here on the top. Most of your leg of lamb is going to come with a layer of fat kind of on it. Some people like to trim it off more. Some people don't. Sometimes the fat can give it a little bit more of a gamey taste in some people's opinions. I like the fat because I render the fat down when I'm cooking it, and it kind of helps keep the meat moist and juicy. What we're going to do is we're going to take a sharp knife and we're just going to cut a couple of slits through this fat. We're going to cut a couple of slits in here, and it's going to give us a place for that flavor just to kind of slide down as it cooks. That flavor will get down, the seasoning will get down into the meat. So now that we've done that, we're going to wash our hands before we put the seasoning on there. All right, now we've washed our hands. You say, well, why'd you wash your hands? Aren't you fixing to get them dirty again? Yes, but I have a little trick that I like to use, is one hand dirty, one hand clean. So now that I've handled this lamb, I wanted to keep this hand clean and this hand will be dirty. So what we'll do with the clean hand is we'll handle our spices, our seasonings, our oil, all that stuff, and this hand will work that stuff into the meat. So the first thing I like to start with is a little bit extra fat. Like I said, fat is kind of the carrier for the flavor, so this is extra virgin olive oil. So we're going to anoint this lamb with this extra virgin olive oil. About 2 teaspoons should be good. So we're just going to get that in there, rub it all over, flip it over, give it kind of a good coating of this olive oil. And then now we'll put that hand down. Now here I just have some regular kosher salt. We're going to sprinkle a little bit of this on here. We're going to work that around on this side, flip it over and do the same thing. Just seasoning a little bit on there on both sides. You don't want to put too much of this salt on there because some of your other seasonings are going to have some salt in there too, so probably just a teaspoon of salt just for both sides there, a teaspoon of salt. So then another seasoning that I really like to use is this Montreal steak seasoning. I like to use this on all kinds of different meat, whether it be lamb or steak or whatever, but I really like to use this. So I'm going to take this and use the sprinkling side, and we're gonna generously sprinkle this on there. Now you can make your own mix of this if you want to. The reason I use this is because it has salt in it, it has pepper in it, it has garlic in it, it has onion in it, and those are some of the things that you would normally just use for seasoning for this type of meat, this lamb or red meat. Pretty much, you want those types of flavorings in there. So you're getting that saltiness, you're getting a little bit of acidity in here, and then with that garlic and onion. And then once you're done with that, I like to also use the herbes de Providence. It's a blend of different herbs, that you can use there. One of the primary things that goes really well with red meat is rosemary, and this has rosemary in it. It also has some sage and thyme. Those are really great for red meat. There's some other blends of spices in there, but I like to use this blend because it has all those things in there. If you don't have this at home and you do just have some rosemary and some thyme, those are really good. to use for your red meat. Now this is a little up to your preference, how much seasoning, how much spice you want on there. So again, just kind of blend that in there, get it on both sides, make sure it's well coated on both sides. And then, like I said, I will let this sit overnight, and I will actually start cooking this tomorrow. And also really make sure you get it on the edges too, all the way around, the top, bottom, all the sides on the edges. And then tomorrow when I start cooking it, I'll show you some of the other techniques. Sorry, I almost forgot. You don't want to leave this just laying out overnight. You want to put it in a Ziploc bag or Great Value brand. As someone mentioned, I do like to use the off-brand when possible. And so I would put this in my Ziploc bag and kind of squeeze the air out of it as much as possible, and then seal that up and put it in my refrigerator. So again, I'm going to leave this one in overnight. You put it in there how much time you have, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Alright, so now we've taken our lamb out of the refrigerator. Another important thing to mention is to let it rest at room temperature before you start cooking it. So I've taken mine out about 2 hours ahead of time to bring the meat up to room temperature. It's still cool, but it's not cold like being in the refrigerator. It's not at like 40 degrees or whatever. So now it's closer to 65 degrees room temperature here. So now I'm going to preheat my oven. I've already preheated my oven to 330. I've got a good amount of fat on the top, so I'm going to cook mine at 330. If you have less fat, then you can raise that temperature up a bit, maybe to 350. And so before I put it in the oven, I'm going to sear it in my skillet here. So I've got a heavy skillet. This is also what I'm going to roast it in. I've got a little rack that I'll put in the bottom of it. I'll show you that in a minute. So we're going to take this out. It's room temperature now. We're going to take it out of the Ziploc. We're going to add a little bit of oil to our pan. What we want to get here is that kind of almost fried outer texture effect. So we're going to get this out. Remember, we've still got this little netting here, so now we're going to go ahead and kind of get it back over this meat. It'll be a little bit harder because the meat has stretched out a little bit since we let it marinate. I'm going to put that front side down first and let it roll towards the back of the pan in case there's any, in case you've got too much oil in there, any splatter is going to happen towards the back and not towards you with the hot oil there. So now we're going to let this sear for just a few seconds on each side. Now we're going to take it and roll it over and sear it on the other side so it gets nice and crispy. So you just want to get a good sear, like I said, all the way around. Roll it up on the sides, let it sear. Again, you don't have to do this part, but it's a preference for me to just sear it all the way around. Some people will just put it straight in the oven and let it roast all the way through. So I'm just going to let that continue searing. And then I'm going to grab my rack and put inside the pan and get it ready to go inside the oven. So I've got a little rack like this. I'm going to take it and put it inside my pan and then set this up. What that does is allows the hot air to get around the entire lamb roast, if you will, and helps cook it evenly, and you get a nice, tender, juicy lamb. Another tool that comes in very handy is one of these thermometers, the probe thermometers. And with the probe thermometer, you can stick this in the meat, into the thickest part, and leave it inside while it's cooking, and you can check the temperature while it's cooking. So I'm going to cook this. I'm going to cook mine to about medium So you can cook it depending on your preference of temperature, internal temperature, whether you like your meat rare, medium, medium well, well done. I don't recommend cooking lamb past medium well, or any red meat for that matter, because then it starts getting more dry, it starts getting more tough, and you start losing the juiciness and the flavor of that. So I'm going to cook mine to a medium. And so now my oven is preheated to 330 degrees, and I'm going to grab a mitt because this pan is going to be very hot. So I'm going to grab a mitt and put this inside the oven. So now we're going to cook this for about 25 to 30 minutes per pound. You know, once we bring it out, another thing to mention is once we bring that meat out, we're going to let it rest for 15 minutes before we cut it. What that does is allows the juices that have kind of been separated from the heat to kind of migrate and rest back into that meat. So when you cut it, it's nice and juicy and very tender. A nice, juicy, tender lamb roast is what we're going to have when we get done with this. So I'll check back in with you once this is done. Alright, so now we've taken the lamb out of the oven. The internal temperature is about 130 degrees. I've let that rest for 15 minutes. One thing I'm not sure if I mentioned before is you want the fat side to be up when you're cooking it. So those juices, as the fat renders, will go through that meat, and also that rack will allow that juice to just drip down to the bottom of the pan too, so your meat's not just sitting in all that fat as well. So we've taken it out of the oven, we've let it rest for 15 minutes. Now we can take and we can cut this netting off of here. We can take our thermometer out. We can place our lamb onto a plate. And it's ready for serving. Well, this is going to be about a medium temperature here, so it's still going to have some good pink throughout, but it's still nice and juicy all the way through. Very tasty. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed making this and having Passover together. You'll see a link also where you can go back and watch my unleavened bread video if you haven't seen that yet, and I'll also be posting a video about celebrating Passover together, including unleavened bread, lamb, bitter herbs, and of course some grape juice. Alright, well, you guys have a great Passover, and we'll see you later.